In the late summer of 1858, the internal order of the American Republic was vibrating with a dangerous mechanical tension, as the gaze of the entire nation fell upon 7 dusty platforms across the state of Illinois, where Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas engaged in a systemic struggle for the soul of the Union. Lincoln realized that the 5-step process for stopping the expansion of slavery required a total intellectual reset of the American political machine. His goal was the United States Senate seat, but his biological purpose was much larger. His problem was the popular sovereignty doctrine of Douglas, which acted as a moral vacuum, allowing slavery to spread under the guise of local democracy. His diagnosis was that a house divided against itself could not stand. His design was a series of 7 face-to-face debates that would force Douglas into a logical abyss, and his execution was a display of aggressive persistence and hyper-realist, debating that transformed a local contest into a global data point. Lincoln used the strategy of the central position to corner Douglas, most famously at the second debate in Freeport, where he applied a mechanical lever known as the Freeport question. He asked Douglas if the people of a territory could exclude slavery prior to the formation of a state constitution. This was a tactical alpha move that forced Douglas into a binary trap. If Douglas said no, he would lose his internal order in Illinois. If he said yes, he would shatter his external order with the southern wing of the Democratic Party. Douglas chose yes, a move that won him the Senate seat but caused a structural collapse of his national brand, effectively clearing the path for Lincoln's big cycle ascent to the presidency in 1860. Throughout these debates, Lincoln emerged as a shaper of the radical truth, arguing that the logic of the Declaration of Independence was a universal biological reality that applied to all men regardless of race. While Douglas relied on deception and racial anxiety to move the human machine of the voters, Lincoln leaned into the momentum of moral clarity, famously stating that there was no mechanical reason why the black man should not be entitled to all the natural rights enumerated in the founding documents. Even though Lincoln technically lost the election due to the legislative math of the time, the data flow from the debates, transmitted by the new mechanical engine of the Associated Press and the Telegraph, made him a national archetype of the Republican cause. He had successfully moved from an obscure country lawyer to a political alpha, capable of challenging the most powerful machine in Washington. The Lincoln-Douglas debates were the turning point, where the strategy of the central position was used to define the moral anchor of the coming war. Lincoln had proven that radical open-mindedness and logical grit could expose the systemic failure of a compromised Union, focus on the raw energy of the outdoor crowds, embrace the cold-blooded Freeport question maneuver, and remember that the most powerful part of any machine is the truth that powers its engine. This was the secret of 1858, and the reason the legacy of the debates remains the granite foundation of American political discourse. As the internal order of the 1858 campaign reached the town of Freeport, the mechanical logic of Abraham Lincoln's strategy moved from defensive maneuvering to a high-stakes, total systemic attack on the political brand of Stephen Douglas. Lincoln realized that to win the big cycle of American history, he had to create a logical abyss from which Douglas could not escape, so he applied the 5-step process to the second debate. His goal was to expose the structural failure in the popular sovereignty doctrine. His problem was that Douglas was a master of deception who could charm any audience. His diagnosis was that the Supreme Court's Dred Scott decision and Douglas's local democracy were in a state of kinetic friction. His design was a single, lethal data point, known as the Freeport question, and his execution was a display of aggressive persistence that forced Douglas to choose between his Illinois seat and the presidency. Lincoln asked if the people of a territory could lawfully exclude slavery before forming a state constitution. If Douglas said no, he would lose his internal order, with Illinois voters who hated the expansion of slavery. If he said yes, he would violate the external order of the pro-slavery South. Douglas attempted a mechanical patch known as the Freeport Doctrine, arguing that the people could exclude slavery by simply not passing local police regulations to protect it. This was a tactical alpha that won Douglas the Senate seat in 1858, but it acted as a systemic poison for the Democratic Party. This moral vacuum in Douglas's logic created a permanent fracture between the northern and southern wings of his party, effectively shattering the machine that had controlled Washington for decades. Lincoln, meanwhile, used the momentum of the debates to project a new American brand based on radical truth and the logic of the Declaration of Independence. Though the mechanical reality of the state legislature's vote eventually favored Douglas, Lincoln had achieved a psychological alpha that resonated across the entire North. He utilized the data flow of the new mechanical engine, the stenographers and the telegraph, to ensure that every word of the debates was printed in major newspapers from New York to Chicago, turning him into a national archetype for the Republican cause. He proved that a leader with grit and logical precision could dismantle a superpower machine through the strategy of the central position. By the end of 1858, Lincoln had moved from a state of obscurity to a state of national destiny, having proven that the "A House Divided" speech was not just a metaphor, but a biological reality that the nation would soon have to face. Focus on the sharp, surgical nature of the Freeport question, embrace the atmospheric tension of the freezing Illinois winds, and remember that a strategic defeat can often be the mechanical foundation for a future total victory. This was the secret of the Freeport trap and the reason the legacy of the debates would lead Lincoln directly to the White House.